Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive, and in this video I want to talk with you about why narcissistic people are so incredibly confusing. So I've had more than a few conversations with people who knew that they had a very narcissistic parent or a very narcissistic family member or a very narcissistic other kind of person in their life, and they were trying to figure out, what does this person want? What do they want? Because it seemed like one day they wanted this and the next day they wanted that. One day this was wrong and the next day it was right, right? And there didn't seem to be any logic. And that's true, there is no logic. When you're trying to understand why a narcissistic person does something, what you have to understand is that they're not coming at it from a kind of principled place. They're not coming at it from a, this is what I'm trying to achieve in the long run kind of place. They're coming at it from a very finicky, in the moment, I just want to feel good without taking any responsibility for my feelings or anything I've said or done. So a narcissistic person is constantly sifting through what they're hearing and what they're seeing, and they're deciding, does this make me feel good or does this make me feel bad? And when it makes them feel bad, they find a way to push it away, to ignore it, to ridicule it, to just say that they don't want that thing, right? So you could come up to them one day with a cake and they would be like, yes, this makes me happy today. Thank you very much. You're a great person. You're the best. You're wonderful. And the next day you come to them with the same cake, but for whatever reason, it doesn't make them feel good. And so now you're a horrible human being who's just trying to fatten them up. That's how extreme and finicky this can be. And so it's very confusing when you're trying to relate to someone and you're trying to understand, what does this person want or need? And you just can't find anything, because whatever you come up with, it's okay one day and then the next day it's not okay. I have learned a lot from just talking to people and hearing from them how they've learned to relate to the world. And I have a significant number of clients who have narcissistic parents. Maybe one parent, maybe two parents, maybe the whole family is very narcissistic. And when you grow up in an environment like that, you are going to learn some narcissistic habits. It's inevitable and it's okay. It doesn't mean that you are a full-blown narcissist. Narcissism actually exists on a scale. So most people have a little bit of narcissism, and that's okay. Like they have the little narcissistic selfish quirks, and that is totally fine. It's only when it gets beyond a certain point that it turns into what we call a narcissistic person, who is someone who doesn't want to look at their own stuff, never takes responsibility, it's never their fault, it's always the world who's doing stuff to them, and that's when it becomes a really big problem. So you can actually learn a lot by just kind of piecing together all these different little habits, little narcissistic habits that people might have, where they're able to talk about it and they're able to reflect on it, like, oh, how did I get to this point where I look at it this way? And imagine that a very narcissistic person is just a combination of all the possible little narcissistic strategies that you might have ever heard of, and now it just becomes like a fortress. Right now they're just walled off from the world, because everything that you throw at them, everything you say to them, everything you confront them with that they don't like, they're going to find a way to turn it around on you, because that's how they deal with stuff. And it can even go to the point where they believe that they are super empathic and they have really big hearts and the world is just so hurtful, because what they do on the inside is they filter and they say, I have a feeling that I don't like. And if they're taking the more of the psychological route, they're going to say, you made me feel that way. It's your fault. You're a bad person, right? There's no sense of, I have an inner process going on and I might have my own hang-ups and my own assumptions and my own filters, and therefore the way I feel is a combination of what happened and how I interpret it and what's going on with me. And the most important thing is that I deal with my own feelings inside of me and understand what they're trying to tell me. No, for them it's just, you did something, like before you walked into the room I felt fine, and now you said something or did something and now I feel bad, so that's on you, right? That's the more psychological approach. And then when you have narcissists who are really into spirituality, they're going to say, before you walked into the room, I felt fine, but you walked into the room and you said or did something, and now I feel bad, so those bad feelings must be yours. I must be an empath who's absorbing everyone's negativity. And empaths exist, okay, just to get that clear. They totally exist. But there's a difference between people who take responsibility for their feelings, who acknowledge, yes, I am sad, I am angry, I have all kinds of feelings that are my own, and maybe I might also be susceptible to stuff from others in some weird psychic way. What's going on with that? Versus people who say, all the feelings that I like, that's me, because here's where the narcissism comes in. That's me because I'm perfect. I'm a perfect person who only has positive feelings. And when they take that to the spiritual, in a spiritual direction, they're going to say, I'm just a more enlightened and loving person because I only feel good and I just only have positive thoughts. But what they're really doing is everything that doesn't meet their standards of positive, they just blame that on someone else. Either psychologically by saying you made me feel that way, or spiritually by saying those feelings and thoughts are not even mine. The only thing that's mine is everything that's pure and clean, which is just so ridiculous, right? But they don't see it that way. They see it as they're just better than us, they're the rest of us, they're more enlightened, they're better, blah, blah, they're more loving. And so this is really important to understand. If you're trying to figure out why do they do this, it has nothing to do with what you did. It has nothing to do with where they're trying to go in life or what they're trying to achieve. They're really just constantly trying, when people have extreme amounts of narcissism, they're constantly trying to manage kind of how they feel. And they constantly want to feel good. And anything that doesn't feel good, they find ways to push it away. They push it away from themselves. And that can be by denying it. It can be by blaming it on someone else. It can, when it comes to emotions, it can be literally pushing them down, pushing them out of view. And there's this really great scene in Grace and Frankie where Grace talks about what she does with anger. And she says, and Grace is kind of like the narcissistic one of the two. So, and she's talking about so when I'm angry, I just kind of push it down until it gets all condensed, and then I just throw it at people. Right? So she's kind of she has a lot of narcissism. She's not exactly a narcissist because she has a self-awareness and there's lightness to it. But people actually do that. They're just okay, I have these things that I don't like. I'm going to push it down, throw it at people. And because that just suits me much better. And then I feel better. I had somebody reach out a while back who I decided not to have a conversation with because I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. And he said to me that he had come to the insight that whenever he was, so first of all, he had trouble when people were judging him, which is a tricky topic because there's judgment and then there's people perceiving something as judgment. And for narcissistic people, they don't distinguish between judging and discerning, right? So if you say to them, if they're wearing a green sweater, but they're self-conscious about it for whatever reason, and you say, hey, you're wearing a green sweater, they might, if it makes them feel bad, they're going to call you judgmental. You're judgmental. It's no, that's not judgment. Judgment is when you say people with green sweaters are horrible, for no good reason, just because they have a green sweater, right? That's judgment, where you're connecting one thing to something else. You're observing something about someone, and then you're connecting a huge negative stereotype to it that has no real connection to the thing. So I lost my train of thought. Woo! There it went. Let's just wait for it to come back. Yeah, so a while back somebody reached out and he said, okay, so I have trouble with judgment, I have trouble with people judging me, and what I figured out that helps is I just kind of express my rage at them and then I feel better. This is a great example of a narcissistic technique where there's no inner processing, there's no inner awareness around, why does this upset me so much? What am I feeling? And processing your feelings on the inside, it's passing around the hot potato as quickly as possible. So it's I've got this hot potato, I don't like it, I want to throw it at someone or just get rid of it as quickly as possible. This is what narcissistic people do with the feelings that they don't like. And they figure out all kinds of strategies to do that. And when you're on the receiving end, it's going to make you feel crazy. Because you're why is this person suddenly yelling at me? I only said they have a green sweater on, which is true. I didn't say it was a bad thing. I just said it's green. But, because they don't have this, because a narcissist has just interpreted that as a negative thing for their own reasons, Now they're blaming you for making them feel bad, and now it's a big thing, right? So it's like, it's very explosive. And so the trick is, don't try to figure it out, because what you need to understand by narcissistic people is kind of how they function and where it's useful to say something and how to say something and when it's not. And where you can get really stuck with dealing with narcissistic people is just endlessly trying to figure them out. Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? Why are they doing that? And they're going to be an endless enigma, because it doesn't make any sense what they're doing unless you understand that it's coming from this very simplistic place of me feel bad, this not me, this on you, this on you. Oh, I feel perfect. And it's just everything they do comes down to that, even when suddenly they change the story. And I've grown up with people who did that, who were just like changing the story, and we all knew if this person tells us a story, we have to check with each other what really happened, because even within 30 minutes, they would have changed the story of what happened into something else. It's like that little game where you sit around sit in a circle and you whisper something into someone's ear, and then at the end of the circle, you check with the first person what was actually said, and it's turned into something completely different, right? That's what narcissists do in their head. They just take something and they filter it through what makes me feel good. I take that, I amplify it. What makes me feel bad, I just blame that on someone or just throw it out there. And it becomes this weird inner filter to just constantly try to make themselves feel good. So you got to understand kind of the basics, but at some point you got to say, okay, this is what they do. It's always going to be a little bit crazy, but what you need to work with when you're dealing with narcissistic people is you need to work with your own feelings, your own reactions, your own triggers, your own stuff. Because where they really have power over you is the things that you don't realize about yourself. Because you got to understand, narcissistic people are constantly training themselves at battle. They are at battle with the world every single day. They are constantly feeling threatened. They're constantly feeling under attack. They're constantly feeling like the world is trying to like upset their perfect little self. And so for them to actually find some kind of stability, they're constantly trying to ward off what they consider as like the bad people. And pretty much anyone can turn into a bad person very quickly in their eyes, okay? But because they're so battle-oriented, they are constantly looking for weaknesses in other people. What is it that you don't see about yourself? What is it that pisses you off? What is it that destabilizes you? They're looking for those things, and they're using them because when they feel hurt by you because you said that they have a green sweater on, they need to get back at you, and they want to get back at you with the biggest weapons they can find, right? And so they try to figure out, what are your weak spots, as in like what are the things that are really going to hurt your feelings, that are going to get you to back off, that are going to get you to become smaller, right? When they feel small and they feel attacked and they feel shame. That's what feeling small is. It's feeling shame. They feel ashamed. They feel small. They feel belittled. They're going to try to make you small, get back at you. So they're going to figure out, what is it that makes you feel small? What is it that makes you feel ashamed, worthless, bad about yourself? And they're going to use that. So even if you're the most peace-loving person on earth, if you're dealing with a narcissist, you're going to be in some kind of battle because they're constantly fighting. And the only way you can diffuse the battle is when you become very solid in yourself and very self-aware and working on your own wounds and triggers. So that basically, when you have a lot of triggers, you have a lot of things that trigger you, that upset you, that hurt you. Somebody only has to do a little bit of pushing to just send you, into some kind of spinning out or crying or being upset or whatever. So that is something in you that is like a raw wound. And you cannot expect everyone to be kind to those wounds. And especially the narcissists are not kind, they're pushing those wounds. That actually serves a kind of bigger purpose on a soul level, where because you're constantly pushing those wounds, you're going to have to heal them, because if you don't, you're going to be hurting all the time, right? So dealing with narcissistic people getting hurt, one of the common strategies is trying to figure out them. Why are they doing this? How can I prevent them from doing this? And what I'm saying is, you cannot stop them from doing this. They are always going to be upset about the most crazy little thing, and they're going to try to attack you. So the best thing you can do is address your own wounds, address your own hurts, address the ways in which you forget about looking at and being with yourself, and you get lost in their little crazy world, right? Like, what is it that draws you in, and how do you get back to yourself and be like, it doesn't matter what they're doing. Well, it matters if you're living with them, please get out, you know. But in a way, like, when they're doing something, what you need to deal with is like, how is this hurting on the inside? And so this is something that I've done in my own life, in my own healing journey. I've been working on this. It's your own healing journey is never done. There's always new, more extreme people who come onto your path, who challenge you, right? And so, but this is something that I've learned really helps. It really works, where you really heal those triggers, you heal those buttons, so that when crazy, weird, upset people who want to pick a fight with you come along, they have very little to push against. They can throw things at you, they can throw insults at you, but you've healed it on the inside, so it doesn't really hurt. It's still, you know, it's still noticeable. You're still like, well, that's not a nice thing to say. But it's more like, okay, noted, you're someone who is just throwing mean things at me. You're trying to get under my skin. Good to know, but it's not like you're reeling from it and crying and overwhelmed and stressed out about it. I had a client who described this really well. She had been with a narcissistic partner, and then she got away from him, and she went through, my program's called No to Narcissist. She went through this program with me. And for a while, she was really afraid of running into him. She was really afraid that she was going to run into her ex because they lived in the same village. But she worked on healing her triggers, healing her wounds. And then when she actually ran into him one day, after about a year, she just felt nothing. And she was like, he's just, you know, like, kind of like, I'm over it. And not pretending to be over it, but just really whatever it was, that whatever hold he had on her, she had healed those places where he kind of had a grip. And so now he just had no power over her, and she could just go about her day, just pretty much ignore him, right? So that's the outcome that you can aim for when you're dealing with a lot of narcissistic people in your life, is getting to a place, not where you're numb, because that's something that a lot of people are going to do. They're like, oh, I'll just numb out, and then I don't feel anything, and then I'm like healed. That's not what I mean at all. In order to go through the healing process, at first, those pains and wounds are going to be amplified. You're going to be more aware of them. Right? You need to really go through them, not around them, not avoid them, not cover them up. You got to go through them and then come out the other end, and then you'll find, oh, now it just doesn't upset me anymore when somebody says that. I could talk about that all day, but I'm going to round off this video. If you're like, okay, wait a minute, I'm on this, if you know you're on this healing journey, but you're like, I don't know how to do it, because it is quite complicated. Like, what exactly do you need to do? What are the healing steps you need to really unhook yourself, like disconnect yourself from all these ways that narcissistic people just push your buttons and just hurt you and just kind of knock you around? I have a program, it's called No to Narcissist, and we work on this, and I teach you how to do the healing work and also help you recognize, okay, what are narcissistic behaviors? How do highly sensitive people often respond? What are the things that are really hard for us to understand and deal with about narcissism? Where do we get caught up and confused typically? And it's a program that has a lot of audios and reading material, but also you have sessions with me where we do the healing work together. I think this is so important, especially in this day and age where there's so much being offended around. And I just found when you do your inner work on your wounds, and I know some people have generational wounds that go way back, but no amount of the world taking your wounds into account is going to make you ultimately feel better. The only thing that's really going to deal with it, like really solve it, is when you deal with those wounds on the inside. And then when people say certain things to you that used to make you feel shitty, it doesn't matter anymore, you know. Of course, it's still better to have people who say nice things, obviously, but it really is when people can only hurt you with the things that are already hurting on the inside, right? And when you become so raw and wounded that every little thing hurts you, you gotta just stop. You gotta stop trying to figure out other people and what they're doing and how to make them stop. You gotta just look at what inside of me needs healing, because when it's healed, it doesn't hurt anymore. But when it's an open wound, it's like every little kernel of salt is going to hurt like hell. And, you know, then you're trying to like figure out the salt, like what is the salt doing and why is it there? But that's not really the point. The point is, if the wound was healed, the salt wouldn't upset it, right? So there's two ways to look at dealing with narcissists. One is they're just horrible people, and you know, like they're just terrible, 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 and we gotta, I don't know, just try to stop them or whatever, which doesn't work, you know. It's a way too complicated big topic for that. The other thing is that people just try to endlessly figure out the narcissist, or like trying to be one step ahead. But like I said, that's like trying to figure out the weather. Like, people have been working on that for quite some time, and I can tell you, at least where I live, they never get it right. They have like an inkling, you know, but even then it can be totally different. That's what narcissists are like, because their actions depend on how they feel in the moment, and how they feel in the moment is also affected by what happened to them 5 minutes before, and you know, it can be anything. Right? So there's no way to really figure them out in the tiny way in the moment, but there are ways to understand the bigger scope of what they're doing and why, so that you can take a step back and be like, okay, what's really going on here? But if you're in that micro interaction with them and just going back and forth with them about something, you're going to get utterly confused, because their inner world is not meant to be logical. Their inner world is meant to distract them from themselves and keep up appearances and just maintain this facade that they're perfect. And in order to do that, because it's very unrealistic, they have to be in this state of inner turmoil to some extent. It's a little bit like the water can never be clear, because if the water was clear, they could see to the bottom of themselves and they would not like what they're seeing, okay? So they are in a state where they constantly have to like stir up the water, so there's some dirt and there's some, you can't see to the bottom, and it's all very confusing. And that's what you're dealing with when you are interacting with a very narcissistic person. You're dealing with that chaos. You're trying to find the bottom, but they're constantly trying to hide it, okay? So you just gotta step back and be like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. And it's just helpful to understand and recognize and work on what are the things that draw you in? What are the things that get you more involved, instead of where you really need to step back and just say, okay, this is crazy town, I'm out of here. Instead, you try to go in and figure it out and help things and smooth things over. Those behaviors are on us, right? Like, why do you do that? What's going on there? What's the fear underneath it? What are the emotions underneath it? Because there's a lot underneath that. And so the biggest danger with dealing with narcissistic people is that you get lost in the struggle and the shuffle with them. And you forget about yourself, you forget about what you want, you just get so caught up in this weird dynamic and trying to figure it out that your whole life just gets put on hold. That's what you don't want, right? So that's what I work on with clients, just getting them back to themselves, working on the things they actually have control over. That does not mean that you can then be okay living with a narcissist or having a narcissistic partner. That's something else. I'm going to talk about that in a different video. But it does mean that when a random narcissist comes along and tries to push your buttons, they're going to have a lot less power over you. All right, that was it for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. This is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. Bye-bye.